The crisp autumn air of Asheville carried the scent of fallen leaves through my open office window as I sipped my morning coffee, oblivious to how swiftly my life was about to change. The peaceful moment shattered abruptly when my phone buzzed with a message from Uncle Marcus. Curious, I tapped it open, expecting his usual check-in. Instead, it was a video attachment, simply captioned, "Emma, you need to see this." My heart quickened slightly at the cryptic words. Uncle Marcus wasn't the type to be overly dramatic. I hesitated briefly, then pressed play. The grainy video showed my family seated around the familiar oak dining table I'd known since childhood. Margaret, my mother, sat at one end, her meticulously styled hair framing an icy smile. Caleb, my brother, leaned back casually, his arrogance radiating clearly even through the shaky footage. Robert, my father, sat silently, listening intently to their conversation. My mother's voice pierced through the silence of my office, dripping with unmistakable contempt. "Emma acts like we should be grateful for her crumbs. She owes us far more after all we've sacrificed to raise her." Each word felt like a sharp jab in my chest. Caleb chuckled bitterly, joining in effortlessly. "Exactly. She flaunts her tech job like some savior, while we're here dealing with real-world issues. If only she knew how insignificant her help actually is." I watched, stunned, as my father simply nodded. The betrayal stung worse coming from him. The same father who had taught me to ride a bicycle, who had praised my academic achievements as a young girl, now sat silently endorsing their cruel words. My hands trembled slightly as I paused the video, forcing myself to breathe deeply. The peaceful mountain view outside, now, seemed harsh and mocking. I'd secretly financed their mortgage for years through Mountain View Investments, my LLC, yet they believed my contributions insignificant. My careful planning, my constant financial backing, was now reduced to nothing but a joke in their eyes. I played the video again, listening carefully, absorbing every hurtful comment like a bitter medicine I needed to swallow. Their disdain was undeniable, every word dripping with ingratitude. Uncle Marcus had always been my confidant, and now I understood why he'd chosen to record this conversation. He'd been quiet about my generosity for years, but even he had reached his limit. Pulling myself together, I shifted to my financial documents spread across my desk. Detailed spreadsheets illuminated by the soft morning light outlined every payment I'd made over the past 4 years, payments they'd never acknowledged nor fully appreciated. My chest tightened as I stared at the totals. $270,000 quietly funneled into their home, their lifestyle, their comfort. Calmly, methodically, I opened the secured file containing the mortgage agreement Olivia, my trusted financial advisor, had drawn up. She had insisted on a specific clause, a purchase option triggered if payments failed. At the time, I'd thought it excessive. Now, gratitude swelled in me for her foresight. Olivia must have sensed something even before I did. My phone buzzed again, breaking my intense concentration. Another message from Uncle Marcus appeared. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I couldn't keep quiet any longer." I stared at the text, carefully crafting my reply. "Thank you for the truth. Don't worry. They'll never know you were the messenger. Things are about to change." Leaning back in my chair, my eyes lingered on the vibrant leaves outside. A strange comfort in the familiar scenery as the gravity of the moment settled over me. For years, I'd quietly carried their burdens, believing my family valued my sacrifice, or at least acknowledged it privately. Today, that illusion crumbled into dust. My thoughts drifted back to 4 years earlier, when the Asheville housing market had faltered. Caleb had taken control of our father's real estate company, driving it steadily downward with reckless decisions. The family home had nearly slipped from their grasp until I'd stepped in, masking my involvement behind Mountain View Investments. Olivia's clever strategy allowed them dignity in ignorance, believing a faceless financial institution held their mortgage, not their supposedly disappointing daughter. I'd felt proud then, quietly protecting their pride. Yet today, watching their casual cruelty, that pride had turned bitter in my mouth. They'd never respected my career in tech, my choices, or my quiet, steadfast support. Instead, they viewed me as an obligation, a silent bank required to pay endless emotional debts. I moved decisively, closing the spreadsheets and financial documents. The next payment was due in exactly 2 weeks. For the first time, a rebellious thought entered my mind. Perhaps I wouldn't be their safety net this time. Perhaps I'd let the weight of their ingratitude finally fall back upon their shoulders. Opening my calendar, I marked the date, clearly October 15th. That would be their reckoning. Until then, I'd maintain my composure, revealing nothing. My fingers hovered briefly over the keyboard before typing another quick message to Uncle Marcus. Stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. Gazing once more out the window, I noticed how the leaves had begun to turn dramatically shades of orange and crimson, signaling the change of season. A poignant parallel. I thought bitterly. My life, like the leaves, was entering a new chapter, inevitable and irreversible. Standing up, I moved to the window, the distant mountains calm and indifferent to my turmoil. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, determined yet bruised by betrayal. Quietly, almost to myself, I whispered, "It's time they learned that actions have consequences." A faint smile curled at the corner of my lips, an unfamiliar edge of resolve I'd never felt so strongly. My family's comfort had long rested on a foundation they never truly appreciated. A house of cards built on my silent patience. It was time to let it fall. As the days crept toward the 15th of October, my phone buzzed relentlessly with texts from my family, each message designed to subtly remind me of my supposed obligation. I played along, replying politely, never betraying that their secret had been exposed. My mother invited me to dinner on a chilly Sunday evening, claiming it was urgent that we talk face to face. I knew exactly what awaited me. A carefully staged act designed to milk more money from their seemingly oblivious daughter. Driving through Asheville's winding, tree-lined streets toward my childhood home, I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of autumn here. Golden leaves blanketed the roads, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in my heart. The closer I got to the family house, the more memories pressed against my resolve. This place, full of history and emotional weight, now felt foreign, tinged by the bitter truths I'd learned. I parked my car in the familiar driveway, noting Caleb's expensive SUV already there, gleaming arrogantly under the fading sunlight. The home I'd secretly owned for years stood imposing, the grand colonial facade bathed in amber hues. Steeling myself, I approached the ornate front door and knocked, a deliberate choice. I no longer felt comfortable simply walking in, as I once had. Margaret greeted me warmly, her arms wide, jewelry sparkling under the hallway lights. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm glad you made it," she cooed, her voice smooth with practiced affection. Her embrace was stiff, carefully rehearsed, meant to reassure me that nothing had changed. I smiled politely, feeling nothing but hollow politeness in return. Robert and Caleb awaited me in the dining room, their posture rigid yet expectant. Caleb wore his usual smug grin, his eyes scanning my appearance critically, as if measuring my worth. My father stood silently, his greeting limited to a brief nod. My stomach tightened as I noticed the paperwork scattered subtly on the dining table, a script for tonight's manipulation. We took our seats, the heavy oak chairs scraping against the hardwood floor in awkward unison. Margaret placed a steaming dish of her signature lasagna in the center, its aroma rich with nostalgia. I knew the gesture was calculated to remind me of happier times, to soften my resistance with familiarity. I served myself deliberately, feeling their eyes tracking my every move. "Emma, dear," Margaret began smoothly, her tone carefully gentle, "your father and I are so proud of your success. It's truly impressive what you've achieved in that technology field of yours." I nodded, swallowing a sarcastic retort about how vague her praise always was. "Software development, Mom," I corrected mildly, taking a slow bite of lasagna. "Of course, software." She smiled sweetly, though I caught the brief flicker of irritation in her eyes. "It's just, well, your brother has been working tirelessly at the real estate firm, and times are difficult right now." Caleb jumped in immediately, clearly rehearsed. "The market is tough, Emma. We're all making sacrifices to keep the family legacy alive. It would mean a lot if you could contribute a bit more." I feigned innocence, masking my disbelief at their audacity. "More? But haven't I already been helping with the mortgage?" Caleb exchanged a quick, uneasy glance with Margaret. "You have," he admitted, his voice carefully steady, "but it's barely keeping things afloat. We're asking for just $2,000 more per month. Given your situation, single, no children, it shouldn't be much of a burden." I let his words hang in the air for a moment, absorbing their entitlement silently. The irony was almost laughable. They had no clue I'd already been contributing over $5,000 each month, secretly propping up their lifestyle through my LLC. I savored another bite, deliberately prolonging the tension before responding. "Times are a bit uncertain right now," I said evenly, my voice neutral. "I'll need to think carefully about increasing my support." Caleb's eyes narrowed, frustration bubbling beneath his forced composure. "Emma, please," he pressed, leaning forward urgently. "You're not in any financial trouble. We know you're doing fine." Margaret interjected swiftly, her voice gentle but firm. "It's about family loyalty. Emma, we've always been there for you. It's only fair to return the favor." I nodded slowly, pretending to weigh their request. "I understand," I said carefully. "I'll give you an answer soon. Just need to speak with my financial advisor first." Robert cleared his throat gruffly, finally breaking his silence. "Make it soon, Emma," he instructed sternly, using the paternal authority that once made me shrink in guilt. "We can't keep waiting forever." His words were the last straw. My resolve hardened into steel, though outwardly I remained composed. "Don't worry, Dad," I replied coolly, meeting his eyes steadily. "You'll have my decision in exactly 8 days." 8 days? Caleb frowned, suspicious. "Why 8 specifically?" I stood calmly, pushing my chair back neatly. "Just some business formalities. I'm sure you understand the importance of those." I allowed my gaze to linger pointedly on the scattered papers in front of him, catching his discomfort clearly. Margaret rose swiftly, hugging me once more, her grip firm yet forced. "Thank you, dear. We knew you'd come through. Family always does." "Indeed," I echoed quietly, smiling faintly. "Family always does." I walked slowly toward the door, leaving them seated awkwardly at the table, whispering as I departed. Pausing briefly in the hallway, I caught fragments of their urgent, hushed voices drifting toward me. "She knows something," Caleb whispered sharply. "Did you see her eyes? She's too calm." "Relax," Robert muttered dismissively. "Emma has always been a pushover. She won't refuse." A cold smile curled my lips as I stepped out into the evening air, the chill wind slicing through my coat. They had no idea how wrong they were. I drove home under the veil of night, the lights of Asheville flickering softly through the mist. Their manipulation no longer stirred guilt in me. Instead, a quiet determination burned steadily in my chest. Arriving home, I immediately texted Olivia, my financial advisor. It's time. They'll miss their next payment. Have everything ready. Her reply buzzed, quickly, concise, and confident. Already done. We're prepared. Closing my eyes briefly, I allowed myself a deep breath, the weight of years slowly lifting. Soon, their carefully built facade would collapse, piece by piece, under the weight of their own deception. They'd spent years underestimating me, viewing kindness as weakness. Now, they'd face the consequences of their mistakes, unaware they'd handed me the key to their undoing. The countdown had begun. The night before the mortgage payment deadline, the house was quiet except for the soft tapping of my keyboard. I sat in my study, the glow from my laptop illuminating pages of legal documents and financial statements. The air was thick with anticipation, but my mind was clear and focused. Olivia, my financial advisor, had prepared everything meticulously. The purchase option clause in the mortgage agreement was the linchpin of my plan, a safety net disguised as legal jargon, ready to protect me from the very family I had once trusted completely. She had walked me through every possible scenario, her confidence bolstering my own. I opened the mortgage contract, once more, scrolling through the fine print that my family never bothered to read. It detailed the terms explicitly. If the mortgage payments were missed, Mountain View Investments had the right to exercise the purchase option immediately. That meant full ownership would transfer to me, and my family would become tenants overnight. The thought was empowering. For years, I had been the invisible pillar holding this family together, while being belittled and mocked behind closed doors. Now, I had the legal power to flip the dynamic entirely. I closed the contract with a steady hand, imagining the look on their faces when reality hit. My phone buzzed again. It was a group chat titled Family Finances, a chat I wasn't part of. Uncle Marcus had secretly shared screenshots with me over the past weeks. In the messages, my family vented their frustration and contempt, plotting to squeeze more money from me. Caleb disparaged my tech career, claiming I was the one who barely helped. Margaret insisted I should contribute more because I was single and had no children. Their entitlement was staggering, their greed clear. Yet they remained clueless about the truth. They had no idea that I was already paying far beyond their share. I thought back to the day I'd first set up Mountain View Investments. Olivia had advised creating an LLC to hold the mortgage, a way to separate my finances legally from theirs. The bank would see payments coming from a company, not an individual. It was brilliant, and at the time, I hadn't fully grasped how vital it would become. The day they had nearly lost the house during the Asheville market downturn still haunted me. Caleb's reckless business decisions had driven the family company toward bankruptcy. I was the one who had bailed them out discreetly, preserving their dignity while shouldering the burden. Now, with the payment deadline looming, I knew this was the moment where years of manipulation and disregard would face reckoning. I checked the calendar. Less than 24 hours remained. I drafted a calm message to my mother confirming I would attend the scheduled dinner the next day. I wouldn't reveal any of my plans, not yet. Patience was critical. As midnight approached, I reviewed my preparation checklist, legal documents ready, eviction notices drafted, all communication logs backed up. I even created a detailed dossier outlining my family's threats and attempts at sabotage to be shared preemptively with my company's HR if necessary. My phone lit up with a text from Caleb. It was a thinly veiled threat about my job security, implying he could stir trouble at my workplace. I forwarded the message immediately to Uncle Marcus and Olivia. We were ready. I felt a strange calm wash over me. For years, I had carried their burdens, believed in their gratitude that never came. Now, the power was mine, and I was prepared to use it. The mountain breeze whispered softly outside my window, mingling with the quiet hum of the city below. Tomorrow, the house of cards they'd built on my silence and sacrifice would finally collapse. But for now, all was still. The morning sun broke over Asheville, painting the hillsides in a delicate wash of pink and gold. I woke before dawn, unable to sleep through the tension winding itself through my body. Today was the day the mortgage payment was due, and for the first time in years, I would not be covering the deficit. The fate of the Donovan home, my home by contract, would be decided in the coming hours. I moved through my morning routine on autopilot, barely tasting my coffee as I stared out over the quiet streets below. In my inbox, Olivia had already sent a confirmation that Mountain View Investments' automated system was ready. Once the payment failed, the notice would be dispatched within minutes. I double-checked every document, every email, every recorded conversation I'd saved as evidence. There would be no loopholes, no last-minute rescues. Just before 9 o'clock, my phone pinged with a bank notification. Margaret and Robert had tried to transfer their portion of the payment, but their account was overdrawn. The payment had bounced. A strange sense of relief mingled with adrenaline in my veins. It was official. The purchase option was triggered. In accordance with the contract, Mountain View Investments now owned the Donovan family home outright, and my family had just become month-to-month tenants. A few moments later, my mother called. Her voice was brittle, frantic. "Emma, something's wrong with the mortgage payment. The bank is saying we defaulted, but that's not possible. We need your help right away." I steadied my breathing before replying, "Actually, Mom, the mortgage wasn't with a bank. It was held by Mountain View Investments. My company. You've been making your payments to me for 4 years now." I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and cold. Her response was a strangled whisper. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find an email waiting in your inbox," I said calmly. "It explains everything. Because you defaulted, Mountain View Investments is exercising its purchase option. The house is now legally mine. Starting next month, you'll be tenants. Your rent will be due in 30 days. The line went quiet. I heard voices in the background, Robert's deep baritone, Caleb's incredulous shout. My family was unraveling in real time, caught completely off guard. Margaret returned, her voice trembling with outrage and disbelief. "You can't do this. Emma, we're family." I fought the old reflex to soften, to reassure her, but stood my ground. I did what I had to do after years of being treated like a burden and an outsider. You all made your choices. Now, so have I. I ended the call before the argument could spiral, heart pounding with a wild mixture of dread and liberation. Almost immediately, my inbox filled with emails and messages from distant relatives, family friends, even neighbors, each pleading with me to reconsider, accusing me of cruelty. I deleted them all without a second thought. I owed no one an explanation. By noon, Olivia confirmed all legal notices had been delivered and received. Uncle Marcus called to check on me, his voice gentle but proud. "You did it, Emma. I know it hurts, but you protected yourself. They can't touch you anymore." That afternoon, I drove to the house, the scene of so many memories, now eerily silent. Margaret and Robert refused to speak to me as I walked through the rooms, their anger a silent wall. Caleb confronted me once, shouting about betrayal and family loyalty, but I answered only with facts and deadlines. "You have 30 days, I repeated, "and I suggest you use them wisely." As I left, the golden leaves swirled around my feet, whispering a farewell. The house that had been both sanctuary and prison was now truly mine, and I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. The reckoning had come and gone. The future was finally, blessedly, mine to shape. The days following the takeover unfolded in a whirlwind of emotion and chaos. Asheville's beauty seemed almost indifferent to the turmoil erupting inside the Donovan home. The phone rang constantly, with calls from Margaret alternating between tearful pleading and scathing accusations. Robert responded with icy silence, refusing to acknowledge my presence whenever our paths crossed. Caleb's anger was a wildfire, unchecked and burning through every fragile boundary left between us. At work, I doubled down on my projects, grateful for the distraction. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but no one pressed. Olivia checked in daily, ensuring that every document, payment receipt, and message was in order. She reassured me that Mountain View Investments' position was unassailable. The law was clear, and every step had been taken with absolute precision. My family, however, refused to accept reality. Margaret left voicemails thick with guilt, weaving stories of sacrifice and maternal devotion, painting herself as the true victim. Caleb escalated his tactics, sending long, venomous emails demanding explanations, then threatening to expose family secrets to my employer. The messages grew darker, culminating in a not-so-veiled threat to sabotage my career if I did not fix this mistake. I forwarded every message to Olivia and to Uncle Marcus, who advised me to remain calm and document everything. One morning, as I prepared for work, a heavy knock rattled my front door. I opened it to find Robert standing stiffly on the porch. He handed me a letter without meeting my gaze, then turned and walked away. Inside was a formal protest, a last-ditch attempt to contest the legality of my actions. Olivia reviewed it within the hour, her response succinct: "They have no case. Hold steady." That night, as rain lashed the city, I sat at my kitchen table with Uncle Marcus, his presence grounding me as the storm outside echoed the conflict in my heart. He recounted his own struggles with family betrayal, reminding me that loyalty demanded respect, not blind obedience. "You gave them every chance, Emma. They chose to see you as a resource, not a daughter." Through it all, the tension at the Donovan house grew unbearable. Margaret and Robert retreated into icy silence, speaking to me only in clipped, transactional phrases about move-out dates and utility transfers. Caleb, always dramatic, vacillated between fury and pitiful appeals. He tried to rally distant relatives and family friends to their cause, spreading twisted versions of the truth to anyone who would listen. Messages poured in, accusing me of heartlessness, of destroying the family legacy. Yet, amid the noise, a few voices of support slipped through, friends who understood the years of sacrifice and colleagues who admired my resolve. Olivia's encouragement became a lifeline, her steady hand keeping me anchored to reality. The countdown continued. 30 days shrank to 20, then 15. Each day I visited the house to inspect repairs and handle logistics. My family's bitterness seemed to permeate the walls, but I refused to engage with their drama. Every interaction was brief, professional, and documented. On the final weekend before their move-out deadline, Margaret made one last desperate attempt. She cornered me in the foyer, her voice trembling with emotion. "Emma, please, this is our home. Where will we go? We're your family." I met her gaze, the familiar ache of old wounds rising, but I did not waver. "You always taught me that actions have consequences. This is simply the result of choices made by everyone in this house, including me." For a moment, she looked as if she might collapse, but then her face hardened. Without another word, she turned and walked away. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, as if the mountains themselves were exhaling after a long, tense silence. The lines had been drawn, and I stood on the side of self-respect, no longer afraid to claim my own peace. The fallout was messy, painful, and deeply personal, but in the heart of the storm, I discovered a clarity that had eluded me for years. I was no longer their scapegoat or savior. I was simply myself, Emma Donovan, and at last that was enough. As the final days of their tenancy slipped away, the tension within the Donovan house became almost unbearable. Each time I visited, the atmosphere was thick with resentment and unspoken grievances. Boxes began to fill the hallways, rooms were stripped of personal touches, and Margaret's beloved garden wilted from neglect. Caleb became a shadow, avoiding me altogether, while Robert's coldness deepened, barely acknowledging my presence except to discuss logistical matters in clipped, businesslike tones. Despite their silent protests, the deadlines remained firm. Olivia's legal team sent reminders about rent payments and move-out procedures, ensuring every communication was official and documented. The walls of my childhood home, once echoing with laughter and family gatherings, now reverberated with the heavy silence of a family undone. Word had spread beyond our immediate circle. Distant relatives called or wrote, some urging me to forgive and forget, others offering whispered congratulations for finally standing up for myself. The community's reaction was divided. A few longtime neighbors crossed the street to avoid me, while others left notes of quiet support in my mailbox. The duality was surreal. I was both villain and heroine in the same small town. Uncle Marcus remained a constant source of strength, stopping by often to help with practical matters and offer his steady presence. We packed up old photographs and memorabilia together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories of happier days. "You know," he said one evening as we boxed up the last of my father's old books, "they'll never understand what you gave up for them. But you don't owe them your life, Emma." With each visit, the transformation of the house became more visible. The empty walls and packed boxes were physical proof that nothing could remain the same. Yet in the spaces left behind, I found something unexpected, room to breathe, room to reclaim pieces of myself I'd set aside for years. It was during this period that Caleb launched his final, desperate attack. True to his threats, he contacted my company's human resources department, spinning wild accusations about my mental stability and alleged misuse of company funds. He even provided out-of-context emails and fabricated stories to back his claims. But he underestimated my preparation. I had already supplied HR with thorough documentation of every interaction and the evidence Uncle Marcus had collected. Olivia's legal guidance had been precise and proactive. The investigation was swift and professional. Within days, HR cleared me of any wrongdoing and, after reviewing the evidence, even flagged Caleb's actions to his professional board. The fallout was immediate. Caleb's reputation suffered, and a formal inquiry into his ethics at the real estate firm was opened. For once, the truth worked in my favor, exposing the lengths to which my family would go to maintain control. The attempted sabotage only strengthened my resolve. It became clear that there was no salvaging a relationship built on manipulation and resentment. I felt both grief and relief as I let go of old hopes that things might ever change. On the eve of their move out, I stood in the empty living room, gazing out the wide bay window as dusk settled over the hills. I realized the weight on my shoulders was finally lifting. The home was no longer a battleground. It was simply a house, ready for a new chapter. In the final hours before their departure, Margaret left a letter on the kitchen counter. It was filled with pleas for understanding, peppered with reminders of sacrifices she had made, but the words no longer held power over me. I read it once, then folded it away, deciding to keep it only as a reminder of how far I'd come. As the moving trucks pulled away and silence settled over the house for the first time in years, I closed the front door gently behind me. I felt a calm resolve, a sense of hard-won peace, knowing I had survived the storm and reclaimed my own life. The tide had turned, and for the first time, I was truly free. The days that followed were unusually quiet. For the first time in years, the Donovan house stood empty, its rooms echoing only with memories. I walked through each one in solitude, feeling the gentle weight of both grief and relief. The scent of old wood and faded perfume clung to the curtains. Sunlight fell across the living room floor, where my brother and I once played. Now dust motes danced in the silence. The closing of this chapter felt final, yet strangely gentle. A door closing on sorrow, but also on years of hidden strength. Olivia met me at the house a few days after my family had gone, clipboard in hand, ready to help with the sale preparations. Her presence was a balm, professional, efficient, but with a kindness that cut through my fatigue. We went from room to room, making notes on repairs, staging, and listing details. With each plan, the house became less of a burden and more of an asset, a future waiting to be shaped rather than a past demanding to be mourned. Uncle Marcus and his wife arrived one afternoon to help clear the final boxes from the attic. We found forgotten holiday decorations, stacks of old letters, and photographs yellowed by time. There were bittersweet moments, smiles at childhood drawings, a lump in my throat as I packed away the last family portrait. Marcus, steady as always, clasped my shoulder. "You honored the good times. Emma, now it's time for your own." Legalities progressed smoothly under Olivia's watchful eye. The house sold quickly, snapped up by a young couple starting their own family. Handing over the keys was both a relief and a moment of unexpected gratitude. I wished them happiness, genuinely hoping they'd fill these rooms with laughter untouched by the scars of the past. With the proceeds from the sale, I followed through on a promise I had made to myself in the darkest hours of the ordeal. I worked with Olivia and a local nonprofit consultant to establish the Mountain View Foundation, a new organization dedicated to supporting those suffering financial abuse, especially within families. The foundation's first outreach event drew dozens from the community, some with stories heartbreakingly similar to my own. Each story reminded me that what had felt like my private hell was, in fact, a quiet epidemic. As spring came to Asheville, I found peace in small things again. Morning walks on the Blue Ridge trails, the laughter of children playing outside my new apartment, coffee with friends who never once asked for more than my company. Uncle Marcus remained a welcome fixture, a reminder that family could still mean love and loyalty if you chose carefully. One evening, standing on my balcony as fireflies flickered in the dusk, I allowed myself to finally feel proud, not just for surviving, but for transforming pain into purpose. My family's betrayal had changed me forever, but it hadn't broken me. Instead, it had given me the courage to protect myself, to help others, and to choose my own peace. As the city settled into twilight, I felt certain of one thing. I was done living for the approval of others. My life was my own, and I would never again apologize for building something no one could take from me: dignity, freedom, and the strength to begin again. In the weeks after the sale, the rhythms of my new life began to settle. The headlines of local gossip faded, replaced by the ordinary sounds of a peaceful Asheville spring. With each day, I felt the old anxieties loosen their grip, a quiet relief blooming where uncertainty used to grow. Still, echoes of the past sometimes crept in, triggered by small reminders: a particular shade of paint, the scent of rosemary from Margaret's long-neglected garden, the chime of a text notification late at night. Caleb, ever determined to reclaim his narrative, made several attempts to reconnect. He sent emails, sometimes apologetic, sometimes combative, always circling around his belief that I owed the family one last chance to make things right. I read the first few, gauging his sincerity, but each message inevitably twisted back to the same theme. His sense of loss was less about family and more about entitlement. Robert's silence, on the other hand, remained unbroken. Margaret left voicemails from time to time, her tone shifting from regret to resentment and back again. I listened only once, realizing that closure would never come from words she could offer. Instead, I focused on building new rituals. The foundation's work gave me purpose. I spent afternoons at the community center, guiding support groups, and listening to stories from people who had endured years of being unseen and undervalued by those closest to them. Each time someone described the moment they reclaimed their agency, I felt a surge of quiet pride. What had begun as an act of survival was now a beacon for others finding their way through darkness. Uncle Marcus and his wife became regular guests in my home. Our Sunday dinners were simple: homemade soup, laughter, the comfort of company chosen, not inherited. Sometimes we talked about the past, but mostly we looked forward. Travel plans, foundation projects, the small pleasures of everyday life. Marcus never offered platitudes, only the reassurance that I was no longer alone in facing the storms that families can bring. As spring deepened, I received an unexpected letter from the new owners of my childhood home. Inside were 2 old photographs and a short note. "We found these in the attic. Thought you might want them." One picture was of Caleb and me as children, running through the sprinkler in the backyard, faces split wide with joy. The other was a family portrait taken on a rare holiday when laughter was genuine and the future still unwritten. Holding them, I felt the pang of grief and gratitude intermingling, a reminder that even in broken stories, there are fragments worth keeping. With the passing weeks, the calls from relatives slowed and then stopped. The city, too, seemed to accept the new order. I was no longer a topic of hushed conversation. I was simply Emma, part of the community in my own right. In moments of quiet, I sometimes reflected on the cost of reclaiming my life, recognizing that the pain of loss was the price of peace. Yet, beneath it all, I found a resilience I had never known. The ties that once held me back had unraveled, and in their absence, I was free to define myself on my own terms. I had not only survived, I had grown, rooted and strong in soil I had chosen for myself. By early summer, the Mountain View Foundation was thriving. The initial outreach had exceeded every hope I dared to hold, and word of our mission spread quickly through Asheville and beyond. Volunteers from all walks of life stepped forward, eager to contribute their time and skills. Each week, the foundation hosted workshops on financial literacy, legal rights, and emotional resilience. Our support groups became sanctuaries for those who had nowhere else to turn, a living testament to the power of second chances. Olivia's guidance was invaluable as we navigated the challenges of nonprofit management. She brought the same meticulous care to the foundation's accounts that she had once used to safeguard my own assets. Together, we built a network of trusted advisors and community partners, ensuring that Mountain View's work would endure far beyond my personal story. One evening, as the summer sun dipped low behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, I attended our first annual fundraising gala. The event was modest by some standards, a gathering in a local park pavilion decorated with wildflowers and string lights, but to me, it was a celebration of everything we had built from the ashes of loss. Guests mingled, laughter rang out, and as I stood before them to speak, I felt a surge of gratitude and pride. For the first time, my voice did not tremble with self-doubt. I spoke openly about my journey, careful not to dwell on bitterness, but to focus on hope and possibility. Faces in the crowd nodded in understanding, some brimming with tears, others with the fierce determination of those who had faced their own storms. When I finished, applause filled the space, warm and honest, dissolving whatever shadows of shame still lingered inside me. Uncle Marcus took a seat beside me as dusk settled in. "You're changing lives? Emma, I hope you see that." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. "I'm changing my own, too." Over the weeks that followed, small victories piled up. Families reunited after years of estrangement. individuals winning legal battles for their financial independence, survivors stepping into new roles as advocates for others. Each story became another stitch in the fabric of the foundation's legacy. At home, life was quiet and rich in its own way. My apartment filled with books, plants, and the laughter of friends who had become my chosen family. The old wounds left by Margaret, Robert, and Caleb remained, but they no longer defined me. I could remember the past with honesty and still greet the future with open arms. On a warm July morning, as I walked the city's bustling farmers market, I realized how much had changed. The bitterness was gone, replaced by something lighter, a readiness to embrace whatever came next. I had built something lasting not only for myself, but for countless others still searching for the courage to begin again. And in the heart of this new life, I finally understood. Family is not a birthright, but a choice woven from trust, kindness, and respect. My foundation was proof of that, a new beginning rising from the quiet ruins of the old. As summer unfurled fully across Asheville, the city's warmth seemed to seep into every part of my life. The past year had changed me in ways I was only beginning to recognize. Each morning, as sunlight spilled through my apartment windows, I felt a deep gratitude for the peace that now defined my days. The chaos and heartbreak of the old Donovan house felt like a distant echo, replaced by new routines and quiet joys. The Mountain View Foundation became not just my work, but my purpose. I watched as people once burdened by secrecy and shame learned to stand tall and demand respect, sometimes for the first time in their lives. I saw friendships form among survivors, saw children smile as their parents reclaimed agency, and listened as stories of pain transformed into stories of hope. Every meeting, every event, every kind word shared was another reminder that letting go of what hurts can create room for something better. Occasionally, shadows from the past returned. Margaret sent a letter through the foundation, a rambling account of her struggles, regret, and lingering resentment. I read it quietly one afternoon, alone in my office. There were pleas for forgiveness tangled with veiled accusations, but this time the words could not wound me. I felt compassion, but not responsibility. I let her letter join the others in a box I kept, proof that I could move forward without denying where I had come from. Caleb's fate became a story whispered through the business community. After the ethics investigation, his reputation never fully recovered, and he moved to another state, seeking a fresh start of his own. Robert retired quietly, his pride bruised, but in time, even his anger softened into silence. Occasionally, news of them reached me, and I felt only a quiet hope that someday they too might find peace. Uncle Marcus continued to be a steady presence. We celebrated the first anniversary of the foundation together with a small gathering at a mountain overlook. There, under a sky streaked with gold and lavender, I thanked him for standing by me when I had nearly lost faith in myself and in the idea of family. He simply smiled and squeezed my hand, his eyes kind and knowing. With each season that passed, I found it easier to embrace the life I had created. There were small adventures, hiking the Blue Ridge Trail's spontaneous trips to new towns, slow mornings with coffee, and a book. There was contentment in work well done, in friendships that asked nothing but honesty, and in the freedom to say yes or no on my own terms. Letting go was not an act of defeat, but of courage. It was an acceptance that some stories and so new ones can begin. The Donovan family's hold on me had dissolved, and in its place stood a new foundation built on trust, resilience, and chosen love. As autumn whispered at the edges of the city once more, I looked forward with a heart unburdened, certain at last that the strength I needed was always mine to claim. Autumn returned to Asheville with a gentle certainty, the leaves painting the hillsides in gold and crimson. The city's transformation was mirrored in my own life. What once felt fragile and uncertain now stood strong, rooted in the choices I had made and the peace I had claimed. There were moments, walking through the market or watching the evening mist settle over the mountains, when I realized just how far I had come from the shadows of my past. The Mountain View Foundation had become a beacon in the community. Our work grew steadily, and stories of families healed and individuals finding strength echoed through our halls. Volunteers returned year after year, and the foundation's success was measured not only by numbers, but by the warmth and safety felt within our walls. Survivors became advocates, and those who had once arrived broken began to lead others to hope. One crisp afternoon, I was invited to speak at a local university. Standing before a crowd of students and faculty, I shared my journey, stripped of bitterness, focused instead on the power of boundaries, resilience, and compassion. When the applause faded, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright with tears. "You gave me courage to start over," she whispered. It was then I understood the quiet power of legacy, not in wealth or reputation, but in the lives we touch when we dare to live truthfully. My own life blossomed with new connections. Old friends returned, not out of obligation, but by genuine affection. I found companionship in ways I had never expected. Hiking partners, book club companions, laughter over shared meals. Uncle Marcus and his wife remained at the center of my chosen family, ever supportive and wise. One evening, I stood on my balcony as the city below glowed under the harvest moon. I thought of Margaret, Robert, and Caleb, not with anger, but with acceptance. Their choices had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. I wished them well, silently releasing the last threads of old pain into the cool night air. Looking ahead, I felt ready for whatever came next. My story was no longer one of loss, but of reclamation and growth. The foundation's work would continue, and so would my own journey, open, honest, and unafraid. As autumn deepened, I closed the door on the past for good and stepped fully into my own legacy, one built on kindness, wisdom, and the unshakable belief that every ending is only the beginning of something new.